I talked with Pete Abeyta about a year ago about his podcast, Middle Class Film Class. And we got to talking about so many movies that we had a lot of fun. And that made this episode a little bit longer than most of the episodes for Story Power. But I hope you enjoy our conversation and you'll go check out some of the movies that we talked about. Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we're passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast in the summer of 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turn to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners, but as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, "Fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Today on Story Power, it is episode 75, and my guest is Pete Abeyta. And Pete, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Lucinda. Thank you for having me.
And I'm very excited because you and I are both movie lovers.
Yes.
So, and I love that you put on your Podmatch profile that you watch 500 movies a year. I guess I should start counting how many we watch.
Have you ever heard of Letterboxd? It's a social media movie app.
No.
Yeah, it's Letterboxd, but with no E at the end, so it's letter BOXD. And you can log your movies. You can write reviews or not. You can rate them or not. But every time you log a movie, it will add to your stats, and you can see what the last movie that your friends have watched and stuff, and comment on their reviews and things. And it's all movie based. So I use that and track it that way because it'll tell me what my favorite movies of the year were that I rated, or my least favorite, and how many rewatches I've had, and how many from each decade I've watched that year and stuff. It's really fun.
Oh yeah,
it's great.
It's sort of like Goodreads for books.
Yeah. I've seen that, and I'm actually this year. It's funny you bring up books, because last year on our show on the podcast, we were tracking my quest for 500 to watch 500 movies, and I beat that by a handful. And this year, my goal is to read 12 books based off of movies that I love, and I'm not a reader. So,
see, I started doing that four or 5 years ago, and it was mostly books classic movies were based on.
Interesting.
So the very first one was The Valley of Decision, and finding that book was really difficult.
Really? I've never heard of that.
Oh yeah, Gregory Peck happens to be one of my favorites. I even have a signed photograph of him on my wall.
Wonderful.
And when he was older, he just looks great because he's got this gray white hair on top. But it is him and Greer Garson, and they have such great chemistry. I wish they'd done more movies together. But it's also kind of historical because it's about the steel industry in the 1800s. His family owns a steel mill. And it took me a long time to find the book because, it was written in the 30s or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Now Voyager. Took me a long time to find that one. So yeah, I started doing that. And then I started keeping track of all the books, movie connections. Mm-hmm. And when I got to 75, I stopped. Because
I was going to say, since you're a teacher, you probably read a fair amount.
I'm a slow reader. So on Goodreads, I always say, oh, I'll read 50 books that year. I'm way behind this year because there were like 3 or 4 books that I started that I just couldn't finish.
Yeah, if I could do 12 in a year, that's going to be a really big feat for me because
Yeah.
I work in automotive for my day job. So
Oh, yeah.
when I graduated high school, I went into trade school and I bought one welding book and that's it. And I know we referenced it a few times when we were beginning and that's it. So I don't really buy books or own books. Movies are my media intake.
Yeah. Well, my background is in theater, but I took a lot of literature classes, enough so that I could even teach English as a highly qualified teacher. And I love reading, but the thing that I love is comparing the book to the movie. And a lot of times book people will say, oh, the movie was nothing like the book. Well, they're two different mediums.
Yeah, absolutely.
Movies are a visual medium and books are in your head, So
yeah, I did the first 2 that I did this year were One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Fight Club. Both great books. Loved them both. Easy reads, both of them. And Cuckoo's Nest is one of my probably my top 10 movies of all time. And it is a very different perspective reading the book because you're in the head of Chief the whole time. And just the world that he sees and that he's building, this outsider's perspective is almost like you're the audience watching the movie, but there's so much more that you get and peek behind his life. And he's a really interesting character.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's been a long time since I read that book and saw the movie.
The movie is the group therapy sessions in that movie. It almost feels like they're not actors. It is unbelievable. And seeing Danny DeVito is unrecognizable when he's young is it's something really fun.
Nurse Ratched is so horrible. You want her to get killed.
What's really funny about that is that they have that new TV series called Ratched. And
is it about her?
It's about her. She's the main like focus point, and she was such a great literary character that they made this book or the series about her, and it's set in the same era, except for it's very colorful. Now it's like all pastels and like bright colors, and I think it's done by the guy that did Haunting on Hill House and what's that other one that just came out, the religious one on the island. But anyways, Mike Flanagan I think is the guy's name. So I think he did it. And they make her seem like she's almost a murderer, like that on that level. And when you rewatch the movie, in the book, she's a little worse. But in the movie, it's like she's annoying. And she is definitely not in there for their best interest. But she doesn't seem like she's that bad of a villain that she basically, her reputation does not match with what you're actually seeing on film. Her reputation is this, like a witch.
Yeah, she's sociopathic.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's what she is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost it's a weird cross between sociopathy and like buying into the bureaucracy of this whole system and almost feeding into it.
Yes. Well, and when we watched the Queen's Gambit, and she's in that institution, and they're giving the children sedatives.
Yeah. Big giant pill of sedatives.
What is going on with that? So in a way, that's the time period of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was sort of their treatment thing, was to give them pills. And
they didn't know any better. They just knew it took the symptoms away. So it's probably doing something for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, making it easier for the staff, making it easier on the staff, not the patients.
Yeah.
Not the patients. Yeah. There's that whole funny segment I don't know if you've ever seen Cloud Atlas. It's one of the ones that I used to show, but it's so long that I can't.
Yeah.
It takes up a whole class period to watch it. But I read the book too. That's another of my movie book links. But that whole segment of in the old folks' home, that whole timeline with what is that actor's name? Oh, he's so funny. Hugh Grant plays his brother.
I can't remember the actors. Because so there's so many people there in prosthetics and different age periods that I always forget.
Yeah. He plays he's in Harry Potter. He plays one of the professors in
Is he one of the older professor guy?
Really, the
really
one
jovial.
who collects people.
Jim Broadbent.
Yes, that's his name, Jim Broadbent. Yes. So that whole thing is so funny. And it's sort of like that same thing. You know, they give people pills to keep it.
Yeah.
So that it's comfortable for the people who work there.
Sure.
Yeah. One of the things I love about teaching dramatic structure is that my students will say things that make me go, oh, wow, I never thought of that before. And one of the students, after we watched Cloud Atlas, said, you know, every one of those timelines is a different kind of movie. It's sci-fi, it's historical, it's that
fantasy, the Gulliver's Island style one is like fantasy.
Yes. And then there's the one that we were just talking about with Jim Broadbent is comedy. You know, so then there's the dystopian future one.
Yeah.
With
this like Soylent Green 1984 style.
Yes. Right. So, and I went, oh, I never thought of it like that before. So that was really insightful. I thought.
That's what we like. Yeah. That's why one of the things we do on the show is that Joseph, there's three of us. There's Joseph, myself, and Tyler. Tyler has he's a very narrow movie watching scope before we started the show. He's into John Carpenter, Wes Craven, old school horror and slashers, really kind of like grindhouse sort of stuff and exploitation movies, where I'm a little bit more plugged into mainstream, but I do like some art house stuff. And Joseph he graduated from film school and he works in editing. So he has a very like technical eye for everything, and he'll see a movie and comment on things that I didn't even notice. You know, subconsciously I might have seen it and noticed it, but not consciously. So our discussions are very. We have somebody who knows what they're talking about, and then I watch an absolute ton of movies, and then Tyler has a unique outlook on life in general. So he's kind of our wild card, and so where none of us are formally trained. I mean, Joseph is probably as close as you can get to that. But we're just the three of us. We're friends in real life. So we've always talk long form movies when we'd hang out outside of work. And we're like, might as well just get some mics and throw it out there, you know?
Yeah, really. Because I don't know the reason I started Story Power. It's probably the same reason you started your podcast. What is the name of your podcast? So people can find it.
It's called Middle Class Film Class, and you can find it anywhere that you think that you can find podcasts, and some places you think you can't. There's some services out there that I've never even heard of before, and then I'll get a Google alert saying, "Oh yeah, your thing's listed on Ghana." I'm like, "What is that?" And I look it up, and it's based out of India.
Yeah,
it's all over the place. But the show's really fun if you're listening to Story Power and you connect with Lucinda's love of movies. Come check us out because we have an interesting take on things, and what sets us a little bit apart from other movie shows is that we record everything live to tape like a radio show. So there's no editing. There's no. We're putting in sound effects and intro music and segment musics live, so we're all commenting on it. It feels very natural and fun, and half of the episodes are more lighthearted news and review and recommendations, and then the other half are digging into a movie that we love or don't love. So
yeah, right. And did you start, because I started mine July of 2020, so it's almost 2 years old, and I love movies so much that I wanted to talk to more people, stories in general, because I love books too. I wanted to talk to people about the stories that they love. That's how it all got started. Is that what started yours?
Ours was basically just that we already were doing a version of the show just in real life without microphones.
Right.
And we were just talking at length about what movie we'd saw or some new release that one of us had seen, and we'd gush over it. And Tyler's mom has a podcast with her sister that's fairly successful, and he's like, it's so easy. You just got to get some mics and blah, 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 and do this. And it progressed a little bit pretty quickly. After about 2 months or 3 months, we'd purchased some better equipment just because we were having a good time and we wanted to keep the quality high. So we're almost 3 years into it now, about 200 and something episodes because we do 2 a week. And we record them all in one shot every Saturday. So as soon as I'm done speaking with you, the guys will be showing up and we're going to do our show. And we split it up into 2 episodes, one on Monday, one on Wednesday. But the impetus was really just that it's fun to talk into a mic. And I don't really have a whole lot of creative outlets in my life. Like my job is kind of demanding. It's hot, long hours. And I'm a creative person, but I'm not good with drawing or painting or any of that stuff. I'm a automotive painter by trade. And it's really fun to make, like, we'll do random show segments, or right now Ezra Miller's this topic that everyone's talking about, this crazy stuff that Ezra Miller's getting into. So I'll make this whole intro segment, Ezra Miller Watch 2022, and every time something new happens, we'll update the listeners. And or do trivia. We'll get other friends from other podcasts onto the show, and we'll do movie trivia. And it's always something different. Every week's a little bit different, so it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so I don't know who Ezra Miller is.
So Ezra Miller is they're the actor that plays the Flash in the modern DC universe. Right. Yeah. Also, have you seen We Need to Talk About Kevin?
Not yet.
Okay, hard watch. It's a little depressive, quite a bit depressive, but Ezra Miller plays the titular Kevin.
I'll have to go look him up. On internet.
So they're kind of just like losing. They're going through like a Mel Gibson moment. So kind of losing their mind out in living in Hawaii, fighting people at bars and getting arrested and stuff like that, and just very weird stuff, like talking as they're being arrested, shouting, "I'm doing this for the art. We're going to make this into an NFT from your body cam footage," and it's just very strange. And there's talks about what they're going to do with the Flash movie, because there's a standalone Flash movie coming out next year, and Warner Brothers is like, do we bury it? Yeah. Do we release it? Do we recast it like Mads Mikkelsen and Johnny Depp in the Dumbledore movie? So
well, and then also. Now what do they do with Amber Heard?
Exactly. Yeah. It is. Yeah. All that stuff is kind of week by week. You'll see interesting things that are popping up on the news. So we'll cover that on our Monday episodes. We call this Gab and Chatter episodes. Yeah. And it's, and then if people also, the other cool thing is that people who listen regularly, if they got thoughts about the show, they write in emails. We read all our messages on the air. We do listener picks as well. So if you write in and want a listener, like a review of one of your movies, our spinning wheel that chooses the movie for next week has 2 fan slots on it. If your movie gets picked from the fan pick list, we'll have you call into the show. You can do a 5-minute little segment about it and talk about what it means to you.
Oh, that's cool.
Or just write in if you're shy, you don't want to get on air. Just write in and we'll read your little blurb on before we review the movie. And
like you did with Brandon.
Yes, listen to Brendan. Brendan's one of our faithfuls. Brendan was listening since day one. He's the first person to give us an iTunes review. So
that's cool.
Yeah, love Brandon.
That's great. Well, now you said that on your Podmatch profile, I think you said you also like classic movies. What are you? How classic?
I think I was classic cars.
Classic cars.
Yeah, because I have a few old school cars, but I do like some classics. Probably. So I have a few people in my life that have kind of pushed me into the movie watching world at a young age. One's my mom. She used to take me out of school. My mom is probably the greatest influence in my life in general, and I'm closer to her personality than I am to my dad's. We mesh very well, and she used to take me out of school, almost just like taking a mental health day. Without me asking, she'd just show up and be like, "Hey, boy, we're gonna skip school today, and we're going to Mill Valley," because I'm in Northern California, near enough to the Bay Area where we could drive to San Francisco in a couple hours. So we'd go out to Mill Valley, this kind of bougie suburb of San Francisco, and we'd go to some art house movie theater and watch some foreign flick. We watched Ponette out there. We watched Bend It Like Beckham, and a couple other like interesting foreign movies. Then that was my first exposure to, you have to actively engage in the movie world if you want to get outside of this Hollywood bubble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she would show me the weird movies and show me, we'd watch subtitled, foreign movies at the house, never dubbed. Dubbing was like a sin at our house, unless it was animated. And so she was a big influence on me. And then my Aunt Linda, who's her sister, she's a classic movie fanatic. She loves Casablanca's her number one.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll send me these recommendations, or even sometimes she'll even mail me DVDs to my house and say, hey, watch this and talk about it on the show. Mm-hmm. And it's always black and white or silent films. And I discovered Maltese Falcon through her. Love that movie. Love that movie. So good. But a lot of the classic stuff gets lost on me just because it's a different era and I don't have as much exposure to it.
Right.
I'd say like Casablanca's great, Maltese Falcon's great, Some Like It Hot, anything Kurosawa, Yojimbo, Seven Samurai. They're all. I haven't seen one Kurosawa that I'm like snoozing at.
Mm-hmm. I've only seen about 3 or 4 of them, and I would always love to show the Seven Samurai and compare it to the Magnificent Seven, but it is so long.
It is long.
Yeah, it would take 2 class periods, and I only have 16 class periods. So, yeah, because that is a really and then the latest Magnificent Seven. It would be fun to compare all of those.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the new Magnificent Seven or the old one, but I know that Seven Samurai just has been. That story's been borrowed in so many different media.
Yes, it has. Well, I like the Magnificent Seven because of the relationship between Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner. That's a really interesting. And then there's another part of that movie where the kids in the town, it's a Mexican town that they're going to save in the first Magnificent Seven. And the little kids, the boys, are always following around Charles Bronson.
Mm-hmm.
And they just idolize him. And finally, one day, he just kind of sits them all down and kind of yells. He isn't really yelling at them, but he's saying, you think I'm a hero, but let me tell you who the real hero is.
Yeah.
It's your dads, because they go out every day and make sure you have food to eat. And, and they're like, oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And without even having seen that Charles Bronson, Yul Brynner version, I know exactly who every character is, because the samurai are so different in their personality in the original that there's Outcast, there's a guy that no one likes, he's the anti-hero and ends up saving the day and sacrificing himself at the end. And I mean, everyone, it's so well written, but just beyond that, the blocking and the way that the shots are composed, it's, I mean, have you seen Yojimbo? Is that one of yours that you've seen?
I don't remember the Japanese names. There's one that I saw that is about, oh gosh, it's been so long. Tell me about that one.
Yojimbo is, there's a basically a killer for hire comes into town, and there's two warring factions of mobsters in this small town. And one of them are the bad guys, and one of them, they're kind of good mobsters in a way, a little bit. And he gets hired by the good guys to basically start taking out the bad guys. And it's almost, he's a true anti-hero. And that there are so many shots that when you're watching that movie that you see the Yojimbo, the titular character, at the very end of this the main thoroughfare of the town. And it's blocked out where you see the gang here, and you're kind of seeing either through the group blocking, or you see like through their legs or something, or it's a tall shot from like the top of a building right next to them. And you can see this great framing, and you're like, I've seen that shot a million times. And this was a 1945 or something like that. So you're like, he has to be the original.
Does Toshiro Mifune play that anti-hero character?
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm gonna look it up real quick and find out. He's I think he's in a lot of his stuff.
Because he's in a lot of.
It is. It's him.
One of the ones I saw of Kurosawa's was these people that got displaced. Something happened and they got displaced, and they were like living in a cave for a while. It was mostly a couple of women, but I don't
know that one.
I can't remember the name of that one. Yeah, Turner Classic Movies was playing a bunch of Kurosawa
Mhm.
at one time, and so I watched some of them on Turner Classic.
And just a correction. Apparently, his character is not named Yojimbo. It's probably something else.
Oh,
That probably just is a name that means something else, like samurai or assassin or something like that.
yeah.
But yeah, it is Toshiro Mifune, and he's great. I want to say he's in Seven Samurai too.
Oh, he is. He is in
Yeah,
Seven.
he's
Yeah,
Yojimbo, Seven Samurai, High and Low. Yeah, there's all. I mean, it's a lot of
he's in
his, a
a
lot of
bunch.
Kurosawa.
Yeah, and I never knew anything about him until he was in the I think it was late '80s, early '90s version of Shogun. He
Mm,
played he played one of the guys. He played the guy that became the Shogun at the end.
mm,
And I read the book after seeing the miniseries,
mm,
and I said, "Oh wow, he's so great." So then I kind of went and found out what he was in.
mm.
I think that's what led me to Seven Samurai. Actually, yeah, was kind of checking out who he was. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and
he
it's
was
like,
older when he did that.
mm. And
Shogun.
it's like I can appreciate all those movies, but it's an interesting thing because the quality of content that gets created now is
Mm-hmm.
so high. The expectations are so high that I'll watch a movie and I'll be just the presentation of it, the overall
Mm-hmm.
look and feel and sound quality and the visual quality of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching it and you're like, it's almost unbelievable that there's so many movies that come out every year and the quality is so high for many of them. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
at least over half of them look amazing. They look great compared to what you would see 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with the 70s or the 60s era of cinema. There's a lot of, there's some really, really fantastic stuff in there, but there's also a god awful amount of stinkers. So,
Mm-hmm.
I do it based off a recommendation from people because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go back and watch a 2.5 hour movie that by today's standards is just boring and lackluster because it was set the stage for everything else.
Well, I'm going to use a an example of that. The Steve McQueen version of Thomas Crown Affair. I saw first. I didn't see that one first. I saw the Pierce Brosnan,
Mhm.
Rene Russo one first, and so then I went back and watched the Steve McQueen one. It was like, this is a classic movie,
Yeah.
but people, well, and
It's so
I've done
funny.
that a lot,
Mhm.
like Mildred Pierce. Oh my gosh, everybody on Turner Classic Movies goes on and on and on about Mildred Pierce. And so I'm not a big Joan Crawford fan. That's one of the reasons why it didn't took me a long time to watch that movie. But I finally went and watched that movie and I said, why
All
does
all
everyone
this.
like this movie?
Yeah.
Because she's a wimp.
Yeah.
Her daughter just treats her horribly and she keeps wanting to get her daughter's love, get her daughter's love. And it was like, I'm sorry, I don't like that. I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
like that movie.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Imitation of Life, I like the older version much better than I like the newer version with Sandra Dee as the daughter and Lana Turner as the mom, because the one with Claudette Colbert,
Mhm.
the relationship between her and the black woman is more like a partnership
Mm.
instead of you're the maid and I'm the, which is kind of how it is in the Lana Turner one.
Mm.
They start off as best friends, but then the black woman becomes her maid, her housekeeper, and it's not like that in the Claudette Colbert one because they both have different professions,
Sure.
but they run this restaurant together. And it's the black woman's recipes that bring people into the restaurant. And Claudette Colbert manages it, if I remember correctly. I've only watched it once. So, yeah, I like that one much better because of the relationship between those two characters.
How do you feel about like horror movies or genre movies, monster flicks, stuff like that?
I am not a big fan of the slasher. I think the 70s and 80s have some really bad movies. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
um, 70s not mine. Like I finally watched this is not a slasher movie or a horror movie, but The French Connection. And my husband and I are like, what is the big deal about this movie?
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't really like it. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of those. If it's suspense or if it's, not like Alien is one that I would characterize a movie that I like because you don't see the monster.
Yeah.
And that creates the tension so much more. Jaws is another one, which of course they had to do that because the
constraints.
The mechanical shark didn't work the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I like more, where it's a little bit of a mystery and you have something to figure out. And I mean, there can be a lot of deaths. There can even be a lot of violence. Like I used to show, this is not another one that's not a monster movie, but The Equalizer has a lot of violence in it. But the story is about his journey to decide if he's going to use his skills to help somebody or not. That's the basic through line of that story. So, yeah. So if there's something like that in the story, there's some point to the main character's journey, I go for it. If it's just for blood and gore, forget it. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, that's there's a whole new breed of, I wouldn't even necessarily call them horror movie directors, but like people like Robert Eggers and Ari Aster that are making some really interesting stuff that it feels more like dramas that just have some supernatural aspects built into it or some horrifying aspects built into it. And most of them, at least from the first 4 releases, I guess 5 now, the Eggers has the Northman now, most of them are based off of either folktale or a story that was some historical story from some culture that I'm not familiar with. And they build these intricate stories based off of that, which I can appreciate, because you watch the movie and you're like, wow, that was crazy. That was traumatizing. And then you start looking into the backstory of it and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I never heard about this. And there's 10 million demons with weird names that you've never heard of before that, exist somewhere in the zeitgeist in like classic American folktale. And they've honed in on this one and made this really interesting story out of it, and then ramped up the trauma. So I really like that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I've been thinking about watching The Northman, but it's going to be one of those that I have to kind of prepare myself for because I'm a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
So
it's a hack and slash. It's a hack and slash movie. There's lots of blood and guts.
Yeah. Well, it's the story that Hamlet is based on, which that's part of the reason why I kind of want to see it.
I really enjoyed it. It was different than Eggers' last 2 movies. He did The Witch and then The Lighthouse. And
yes, those 2 look very interesting too.
Yes, The Witch is great. It's a great tonal movie. The whole tone of the movie is very dour, and there's a low building suspense throughout the whole thing. And there's not a whole lot of like terrifying, grotesque moments in it. But what you do see is effective on on a deeper level. And there's a child performance there from the oldest son of the family that he's possessed, and it's like him awakening from a possession that is like, I'd be impressed if he was an adult, but he's like 11 years old. The performance is so good. So that one really, I happened to see that in theaters, luckily. Couldn't believe it. It was so interesting and so different to me. And half the people, when they were leaving the theater, as I was listening to people leave this little tiny art house theater in Davis, and people were like, what, that's it? What the hell was that? Kind of mumbling to themselves. And I'm sitting there shocked as the credits were rolling, like, this is amazing. Special. This is something special. And then The Lighthouse was a movie when that came out. I want to say 2019. I think it was
with Robert Pattinson.
Yeah. Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe.
Right.
I've seen it probably 5-6 times. It's unbelievable. And if you're a classic movie like historian, self-proclaimed historian, if you're like into the classic stuff, if you like dissecting movies like I know you do, give that one a watch, because it's a psychological thriller. but there's no, they don't leave the lighthouse. It's an old lighthouse keeper and a young one coming to this rock in the middle of nowhere off the coast of Nova Scotia. And they're losing their minds. They're going insane, having cabin fever, essentially. And you're not sure what's right, what's wrong, what's real, what's not. Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? Are they both one or the other? And it takes so many turns that it just makes your mind melt that by the end, it's I don't know. It's a very unique type of movie. I've never seen one quite like it. And the really cool thing is too that Edgar's got a lens, a classic lens from a film camera from like 1902, retrofitted it to a modern body and was able to shoot with a classic glass lens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there's a lot of shots in it where I'm watching, and it's 4:3 aspect ratio. It's black and white, high contrast, a lot of shadows and a lot of bright lights. And it feels like you're watching a movie from the 30s with content that you would never ever get in the 30s. Like a story that's so out of this world, and some shots that are so crazy. And there's some great long tracking shots all over the lighthouse, and some really interesting. I don't know. It's if I was going to say any of those, I'd say go watch The Lighthouse. Yeah,
I'll have to watch that.
It is great. Yeah.
It's always disappointing to me when there's this really great movie that transcends the story, the theme transcend just your regular, ordinary Hollywood movie, and people don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the one, and I can't think the name of it. Casey Affleck is the main character, I think.
Is it Manchester by the Sea?
Yes.
Haven't seen it.
My brother-in-law is he belongs to AFTRA because, well, now it's both, but because he's a cameraman for a news station. So he has to watch these movies and vote on them for the Oscars. Cool. One time we were at their house for Christmas, and he was streaming movies, and we watched that movie, and Barry and I were like, wow. Wow. And everybody else is, I don't like that movie. It's like, what?
I've heard it's sad and depressing. That's the only thing I've heard about it.
Well, there isn't a measure of hope at the end, though. And that's the thing that I always look for. Is there a measure of hope at the end? Because he realizes he can't take care of his nephew because he's too messed up to take care of his nephew. He has to take care of himself before he takes care of his nephew. And it's heart-wrenching because, his nephew wants to stay with him, but he tries to explain, look, I'm messed up and I need to go take care of myself. And he puts his nephew with this really great family. So in the end, it's going to be better, and they're going to be able to come back together at some point.
Yeah.
But it is, yes, it's pretty depressing. But the thing that Barry and I just went, wow, because he was adult enough to say, I messed up and I need to heal myself before I can be a good parent to you. So.
I don't know anything about the story, but I'm all for a depressing movie. I'm okay with that. One of my probably the biggest reason why I really enjoy the medium of film is that it forces emotions into you that you either might never experience naturally in your life or don't want to experience yourself, but it's almost like riding a roller coaster. It's like you don't want to, there's no time in your real life where you want to fear for your actual death, but that experience is something different. And watching a movie that is just completely empties your tear ducts, it feels good.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last movie that I really bawled my eyes out at. Maybe at the end of Onward. That one hit me really hard for some reason. Have you seen that one?
No.
Disney's Onward. It's a
is it new?
Yeah, it came out 2 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. It's on Disney Plus right now.
Oh, I think that's one that Barry and I were saying we want to watch. We're sort of in this, we have never seen Poirot, and so we're binge watching all of the Poirots, and there's like 10. We're on season 5. So
Wow.
right now, but yeah, that's one that we saw. Oh, Onward. Yeah, we wanted to see that. So yeah, we'll probably watch that.
It's two brothers, and it's set in this like kind of fairy tale fantasy world where they're gnomes or trolls or something like that, and they live in like a mushroom, and there's a whole society that goes along with it, and there's minotaurs and griffins and ogres and stuff like that, and it's a younger brother who's about to graduate high school, and then a kind of an older burnout brother, and they go on a road trip to basically try to find their dad who passed away. He passed away when they were young. Gold crystal that can bring him back for one day or something like that. And they're on a road trip to go basically find the other half of the crystal to do it. And at the end, there's naturally a sort of reunion, and the father-son relationship is like, anytime I watch a movie that's got a father-son relationship, good or bad, it hits me. And I don't know why, because me and my dad have a great relationship. There's no there's no love lost there. There's no scorn, retribution that needs to be mended or something like that. But watching like Big Fish at the end, it's like, oh, bawl my eyes out every time.
I just saved that one. I do want to see that one.
Yeah, it's good.
Right. Parent and family relationships. Any kind of family relationships are interesting, I think. And even like in Harry Potter, when he doesn't really have a family, but he makes a family.
Yeah.
Found families are really interesting to me. And situations sort of like Harry Potter, or there are so many stories like this, where a character is just plopped down into a situation and they have to navigate it and survive, like the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Another book movie connection for me. And yeah, so I guess it's because we moved a lot and I got plopped down into these new situations and I had to kind of
got it.
Sit back, look at the lay of land. Oh, how can I fit in, here? So those kinds of situations, or where people they come up, they've been living their lives one way and then something happens and their lives explode and they have to decide, oh, now what am I going to do?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what movies that might fit that. I like movies where they feature bands as well. Like musical bands, because that's a sort of found family thing. There's a really fun, it's Norwegian. I think it's Norwegian, or it might even be Finnish, but it's called Heavy Trip, and it's a comedy road trip heavy metal friendship movie.
How fun!
And it is wild. It's a little on the like harder R side, because naturally they're a heavy metal band, but they play in this tiny little town in, I want to say it's Finland, and they've never performed any of their music to a live audience. They always just perform in their friend's basement, who is he lives at a reindeer farm. They butcher reindeer, and one of their bandmates dies, and they say, in order to honor him, we're going to take his body to this heavy metal competition festival in Norway. We're going to go across the country borders, and we're going to take him there, and we're going to perform, and we're going to play on stage with him. And it is so funny. The humor works because some of them are so timid. The characters are so timid, but they're like playing this like wild heavy metal music, and the humor is great. So I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime right now too.
I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, it's so fun. Heavy Trip, that's what it's called.
Heavy Trip. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. Well, I'm going to go back to Casablanca and Maltese Falcon because Casablanca is one that I have shown over and over and over again in dramatic structure.
Yeah.
This is the first semester I'm not going to have that movie. But I was so surprised. One of my former students, who was one of my first guests on Story Power, said, I loved that movie so much that I went out and bought it. And I was like, really? Nice. Because most of the time when I show black and white movies in dramatic structure class, they're like, we have to watch this black and white movie.
It's so strange that your students would be that way, because why would you go into a dramatic structure of movie class if you weren't looking for that?
Right. Well, a lot of them have to take it because they're theater majors. It's a required class for them. And but once they see the artistry of those movies, they settle down and they get the story. Sometimes they get the story better because they're not distracted by special effects and, So, but I wanted to show, in fact, I did show it once and the students just couldn't connect with Maltese Falcon, but it happens
really?
to be, it happens
Dude,
to be
Peter Lorre, and that's great.
Oh, I know.
I was entranced by him. His whole like energy was so great.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and I like Sidney Greenstreet as well.
Who does that person play?
Sidney Greenstreet is the guy that plays the fat guy.
Okay, let's see here. I'm looking him up right now.
He's in in Casablanca too. He plays the owner of the Blue Parrot.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I see him. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that movie struck me. It surprised me because there are, like I said before, it's a coin flip if I'm going to watch a classic that's been recommended to me, that it's going to land at all. I mean, I feel there's a whole genre of movie, it's not a genre, but like a subsection of movies that if you saw it at the time in your youth, you're going to cling to it being a good movie. Mm-hmm. And then if you go back and rewatch it with enough time between watches, it might fade away. Like we did Space Jam on our show, and Tyler really wanted to review Space Jam. He thought it was the best when he was a kid, and we watched it, and we're all like, "Wow, this is bad. This is a bad movie. This is terrible." And we did the second one just for closure when it came out. We did like a release day special episode, and that was even worse. Oh my God! So, like The Goonies, The Sandlot.
Oh, right.
That type of thing, kind of a kid's adventure movies. When you watch it and you're a kid, you're like, this is the height of cinema. We can't get better than this. Let's wrap it up, boys, And and then you rewatch it as an adult, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think with a total classic, like the black and white classic cinema, for people who've never explored that's the risk you take. It's a coin flip, and Maltese Falcon was just like checked every box for me. But then again, I love noirs. Really love noirs. So
yeah, and there are a bunch of really great ones. One of my favorite ones has it's the three Roberts: Robert Ryan, Robert Mitchum, and Robert Young.
Oh wow.
And it's called I think it's called Crossfire, or no, what's it called? I'm going to look it up. Okay. Because it's right after World War II, and there are these 3 or 4 guys.
1947 Crossfire.
Yeah,
you got it right.
And it's, oh my goodness, it's Robert Ryan plays this really horrible guy who's anti-Semitic, and it's a murder mystery kind of thing. Okay. Robert Young plays the detective, and Robert Mitchum is somebody who he was in the same unit, I think, with Robert Ryan, never liked him. And so he's like one of the witnesses, but it's this really interesting look at, it's one of those things where Robert Ryan assumes something about the Jewish character that is completely wrong. And then tragedy happens around his misunderstanding. Is what I want to say. His misunderstanding about this Jewish character. Yeah, and so
the story kind of reminds me of Paths of Glory, old Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, right, yeah, with
that's
Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas, yeah, that's a great one. That's a solid movie.
I think I've only seen that once, or maybe I've only seen parts of it. Yeah. Well, and there's another one that is Gregory Peck. That is, I think it's Russians fighting in the war. What's the name of that one? That I've seen that is really good too. There are a bunch of them. There are a bunch of really great. Some movies are amazingly fresh and speak to what's happening today.
Yeah, it's wild.
One that I always talk about is Now Voyager. And I can't remember the first time I saw it. It's Betty Davis. And she comes from this really wealthy Boston family. Her mother's completely controlled her whole entire life. She dictates what she wears, what she reads, who she goes out with. And she's approaching 30, if she's not 30. And she has what they called a nervous breakdown. Well, her sister-in-law has sympathy for her. Mm-hmm. She cares for her. All of Betty Davis's brothers are a lot older, mm-hmm. but this sister-in-law happens to be closer to her age. Mm. And so she sends her off to a sanitarium when she has.
Oh, wow.
And it's a neat movie because it shows her evolution of learning to love herself, learning to make friends, socialize, gain confidence. And she's away from her mom for like 6 months because eventually she goes on a cruise and practices what she's learned at the sanitarium. And the sanitarium it's a little bit different because what the Dr. Jackwith, played by one of Betty Davis's best friends, Claude Rains, he has them do social things, learn tennis, go outside for walks, play games together, that kind of thing to learn to socialize. Because I think his whole thing is most people's mental issues have to do with not liking themselves.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never even heard of this one before, and it's streaming on HBO Max right now, so I just added it to my list.
Yes. And she learns. The thing that I love about it is it shows you, in a way, it shows you practical ways because she has to go home and deal with her mom. Mm-hmm. Practical ways to kind of walk that fine line with the difficult people in your life. Mm-hmm. So you can learn some skills from it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very cool. Yeah. I think probably one of the movies that I've seen that applies so much to what I do in my life is just kind of on a personal level is Whiplash. 2014, I think, Whiplash. It's J.K. Simmons, Miles Teller, directed by Damien Chazelle.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that.
A fantastic, easy to watch movie. It's like 90 minutes in and out. It's about a young college freshman drummer who goes to this essentially like a Juilliard called the Schaefer Music Conservatory in Chicago, and he wants to be the best drummer, not just the best, but one of the greats. He wants to be Buddy Rich, basically. Mm-hmm. So he pairs up with the studio band, which is the highest accolade band, a competition band, and J.K. Simmons is this abusive instructor. And
he won an Oscar for that.
Yes. It is the first time I saw J.K. Simmons and thought, holy moly, because he's been great in a lot of things. He's always been this like bit part actor, character actor. Mm-hmm. Best J. Jonah Jameson we're ever going to get from Spider-Man. But as Terrence Fletcher, the abusive teacher, he is something else. And the whole movie basically toys with the idea of, is pushing somebody so far that they give up, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because in Fletcher's mind, the teacher, he's like, the next great would never give up. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how hard I push you, you won't give up unless you're not one of the greats. So do you want to be one of the greats or not? And there's some really dark stuff that happens, not with the two characters, but then you find out about past, students that that he did the same thing with. Mm-hmm. And Miles Teller actually does play drums, and he actually plays drums in the movie. Mm-hmm. And Damien Chazelle wrote and directed it. He went on to do some fantastic stuff, obviously like La La Land and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But his personal experiences in a jazz band shaped the movie. Mm-hmm. I have experience with that too. I played trombone for 8 years, all the way. I played in competition bands. I played in symphonic orchestras, jazz ensembles, things like that. Mm-hmm. And just the idea of there's one line at the very end of the movie when they're having their heart to heart. And the teacher says, the two most hurtful words in the English language are good job. Because And essentially the idea is that it's never good enough. You should never hear that. It's always, you can do better. You can push yourself. Why didn't you do it like this? Blah, 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 whatever. And it's that whole helicopter mom mentality, pushing your kids so far versus love and nurture. And what is the right answer? And there's sometimes that I watch it and I'm like, okay, well, I kind of see Terrence, I see Fletcher's side. And then other times you're like, no, absolutely not. He's a maniac. Now I see Neiman's side. And there is this weird internal struggle there. And obviously the answer lies somewhere in the middle and every person's different, that sort of thing. But watch Whiplash, you'll get some life vibes.
Well, I don't know if I can, because it's completely opposite to my teaching philosophy.
Then I think it's even the fact that you're in a position of leadership, it's even more important, because you can look at that and be like, that's absolutely, this is a monster. But it kind of tugs at ideas in your head and kind of challenges your preconceived notions. So I love that. And there's the final scene when he's doing his big drum solo is, number one, a fantastic solo in itself. It is just the best. And it nailed every single time. It gives me goosebumps, makes my eyes well up. And his dad, the student's dad, gets to see it for the first time, what his son is capable of, because he's been doubting him, more or less supportive, but doubting this whole time, played by Paul Reiser. And then, but that final solo nails it. And he just gets the little tiny smile and a little tiny nod of approval from his teacher. Woo, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, because it probably has to do with my upbringing. I had a dad who was he's the one that got me into the whole classic movie thing anyway. But he was so supportive. And it was like he always knew that we could do better, but it was, oh, okay, yeah, you made some mistakes, so now you learn from those.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, doing theater, I've met some people who are like that, tear you down, and you don't get the best performances from people when you do that.
No. I'm with you. I'm with you.
So tell me, make a suggestion for our listeners of something that you've seen recently that you really liked, that you think they should see.
So there's a gem that I've been kind of championing. I'm a noir fan. Keep that in mind. This is a modern noir set in a small town. It's called The Kid Detective. It's from 2020.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yes, and it's starring Adam Brody from what most people would know him from, like the OC back in the day, and had no idea he was this capable of an actor. He's very good in it. There's a couple other people you might recognize, but no one that's really sticks out. He's the star of the show, and the concept is such a fun idea. He's like a Hardy Boys type kid detective, 12, 13-year-old Abe Applebaum. And he solves the case of the missing fundraiser money for the church. And he's, so kids will hire him to find out who stole their bike for 50 cents or something like that. And he does this thing, and he gets in the newspaper, and he gets the key to the city, and he gets, the local ice cream shop gives him a free scoop of ice cream every day for the rest of his life. And then a child, one of his classmates, goes missing, unsolved mystery, and everyone's leaning on him to solve it. And he's like 12. Yeah. And it just crushes him. He can never solve it. So flash forward, he's now 35, 33 years old. He's still solving mysteries, and they're still like, I want you to find out if this kid says that his dad plays for the Yankees. His uncle plays for the Yankees. I need you to find out if it's true. And he's like, okay, $2. And he charges the school kid $2 to figure it out. Yeah. And he's still doing these like small time mystery sort of stuff. And then there's a murder in the town, and he decides he's going to try to solve it. And his parents are like kind of supportive, but like, I think this is too much for you, boy, blah, 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 blah. And everyone doubts him because it's been 20 years and he's still kind of a schmuck. And the places that it goes is super fun. It has all the great classic noir tropes. It shows all his little tricks on getting clues and baiting stuff and, leaving windows cracked so we can sneak into the house later. But it's all done modern and in this very small town. And the ending is shocking. When you get to the end, it's like, I don't I don't like a lot of mysteries that just have like a very predictable ending. We watched Murder on the Nile, Death on the Nile. Yeah, Death on the Nile recently. And it's like, it was fun. It's a good popcorn movie, I suppose. But when we got to the end, we're like, yeah, we called it. Yeah, okay, well, there's this and that, and slight twist. But this one has an ending that you're just like, you don't see it coming at all. You'll never see it coming.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that sounds like this is a series, though. Home Before Dark. About it's based on an actual person, young woman. She's the
Home
youngest.
Before Dark.
Home Before Dark, and it's based on a young woman. She's actually 9 or 10 in the series. She's a registered journalist. She's the youngest registered journalist in the country.
Interesting.
Yeah, and her father was a journalist in New York, and so they have to move back to his hometown, and hit one of his friends when he was 10 or 11 years old disappeared. And that's like this cloud that has hung over the town for all these intervening years. And she figures it out.
Sounds cool. What's it called again?
Home Before Dark.
Home Before Dark. Okay, I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. And she actually, the real young woman, solved a mystery.
It was on Apple TV?
In real life.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
That's and that's kind of what, So I don't.
All that to the list. I don't do series very often, but I have a side list of TV, I guess TV, quote unquote TV series. So once me and my girlfriend finish running through what we're on right now, then we'll pick the next series and watch them together.
That's it's a really interesting one.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like very similar story structure. And I know a couple people I've recommended to watch The Kid Detective that are just not into mystery noirs. It didn't really land on them. But the soundtrack is great. The cinematography is, there's nothing super, super special about it. There's a couple scenes that are really interesting. But the story is really fantastic. And it's a writer-director. First time, I want to say this is his first feature. Yeah. And it just like nails the tone perfectly. I really loved it.
Well, and I'm just going to say one more thing before we go. Death on the Nile and the Murder on the Orient Express are based on Agatha Christie. And as I said, we're watching Poirot. And I think that a lot of modern mysteries and film noir borrow from her. And yes, she's one of the most popular mystery writers, but we can kind of predict because of that, because modern people have borrowed from her.
Exactly. There's something to be said about a set story structure and doing a tried and true method. It's not like it doesn't anger me when I get to the end of it. I'm like, okay, it could have been nice if there was a little bit of time put into, like we just Knives Out is probably like the best example of a modern whodunit. So cool. And when it gets to the end, you're like, that makes sense. All the clues were there for me the whole time. And there is one definitive ending, as opposed to the 1985 movie we just reviewed on the show, Clue. There's 4 endings or 3 endings or whatever. And it makes sense because it's based off a board game where the killers are different. Every time you play it, the killer's different. So I get it. But it's kind of a cop-out. It's like the writing is, it doesn't show you how it could, that makes sense within the context of the story. So I can really appreciate a clever ending in a movie like that. And I think Knives Out nailed it. So did Kid Detective.
Great. I'm going to have to watch The Kid Detective. Thank you.
You're going to love it. I hope.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure I will. I will. Well, man, this has been so much fun. We could talk for hours and hours, and I appreciate you being my guest.
Absolutely.
And have fun recording your podcast today. What are you talking about?
So our episode today is on Roadhouse. I've never seen it before. It's blind spot for me. And it's basically like dumb fun. I watched it last night.
Swayze?
Yeah, Patrick Swayze, Sam Elliott. Young total beefcake, Sam Elliott in this. You look at him, you're like, dang, I can see why the ladies love him.
Mm-hmm.
Young Sam Elliott, and he still plays the quote unquote old guy in this, but it's what year was that? 86 or something like that. But so we'll do some news for the first half, and then do our recommendations for the week, and then we'll talk. Cool. And one of my recommendations this week is Splash, streaming on Disney Plus. Rewatch that.
That's fun.
It's a fun one from my childhood. I think it's pretty much feels exactly the same as when I watched it as a kid.
That's great.
Yeah, so it'll be a good time, and thanks for having me. It really has been nice.
Oh, good. Well, have fun recording your next episode for your own podcast.
Yeah, and then if when we have a open spot for some trivia, maybe you want to come on, we'll do some old school trivia with you.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
I may not know everything, but yes, that sounds fun. I'd love to do that. Well, say hi to you. I don't know your partners, but say hi to them for me.
I will. And for listeners that are hearing this right now, if you want to give us a shot or just take a listen, just go to whatever podcast player you're listening to this show on right now. Go to the search bar and type in Middle Class Film Class, and you'll see our icons. It's black and white. It's the 3 silhouettes of our faces. Real easy to find, and it's fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and we try to keep it light and keep it funny, and give us a shot because we love interacting with our listeners.
That's great. Yeah, I do too.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lucinda.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Before I go, I'd like to give a big shout out to Podmatch, which I call a dating service for podcasters. Since I joined their platform, I have met so many wonderful people from all over the world, and they make the matches so easy that if you are a podcaster or you have a message that you want to share, you might want to consider checking them out. The affiliate link is at the bottom of my show notes on my website at Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. Part of what I love about them is that they promote civil conversations, and can't we use that right now? So if you check them out, tell them Lucinda sent you. I'd also like to invite you to my Patreon community, where we will have chats with authors or creators. We'll have member chats about the stories that they love, and occasionally we'll have extra episodes or uncut episodes of Story Power. So please go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/storypower without the hyphen, all one word. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.